longtime friend and client, Jon Ede. We've been together for 2 years now.
Yeah, just about maybe closer to 3. I feel like it's closer to 3
It feels
actually,
like
but
3.
yeah, but it might be 2, right.
Yeah, and it's been an absolute pleasure helping you. From day 1, it's been absolutely extraordinary. And why don't we go into who you are, what you do, and, how we got started together, man?
Well, I'll go into who I am. So I am Jonathan. I'm a 45-year-old father of 3. My oldest is 18, my youngest is 6. I work a relatively demanding career field um, that I love. I love it. It's a passion of mine. Some things are just callings, and I'm blessed to be working in an area that I believe is a calling and that I could do meaningful work. But that work is also comes with a lot of stressors, which played a big part in my overall health over the past. Uh, Actually, today is let me see. Today is the 28th. Today's my 20th anniversary with my in my particular career field. So yeah, for the past 20 years, it's definitely played a big role in it. I work in an area that physical fitness is paramount. However, for whatever reason, along the way, I had some personal struggles that put me on a different path. And at one point in my career, I put on 75 pounds, weighing my heaviest around 320. Back in 2015, it was 2015. I had a boss that said to me that wouldn't be a good representation for the particular agency that I work for because I was completely out of shape, and that just kind of blew my mind because I was one of those people that would go to, and if they needed something or they needed some information or needed a task done, I was the person to get it done. So in my mind, I was the epitome of what a representation of the agency was, but I did not look the part. So at that point, I was like, well, I got to do something a little bit different. So 2015 was really my taking control back of my life. But it wasn't until I really actually started working with you, Vince, that I was able to put a lot of things in perspectives, and and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. That helped me get to where I am today.
Yeah, it's always been a pleasure working with you, man, and I gotta tell you, like, I was pleasantly surprised when you reached out. I remember when you did, I was, like, so shocked, and I was like and it turned Andrea, and because you used to be Andrea's boss, and she even turned, she was like I was like, "Really?" And then I was like, "Yeah." And I had already watched your training, and I already watched your stuff, and you were super, super consistent on stuff. And then you sent me what you were doing, and I was so surprised. And I was like, "Oh, this will be such an easy fix. This will be such an easy fix." And I remember seeing it and being like, "He already works hard, so he's got the 99% done."
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I saw a lot of posts. Like I said, Andrea, I worked with her, and so I saw a lot of posts, and I saw a lot of people that I work with that had been working with you, and for the longest time, I've been thinking about working with a coach. I'd done some online coaches, and they were great, but they were so far away, and they were Instagram folks, and there was never anybody that I could actually reach out to and talk about their experiences with that I knew. I'm a very skeptical person, so I actually like to talk to people that I know to kind of hear feedback. And there were a couple of people that worked directly with me or around me that had worked with you, and I was like, well, let me just reach, let me take that leap of faith and just reach out because if I keep on thinking about it, then I'm always going to wonder what if. And I'm glad I don't have to wonder what if, and that I actually reached out, and we've been working on this journey together now for you point out a little bit over 2 years actually.
Yeah, let's talk about where you like what was the spot you were in when you finally said enough is enough and you reached out?
I wasn't making any progress. Like you pointed out, I've always loved to work out. I grew up in Nigeria, West Africa. Born in Monterey, California, but I was raised in Nigeria, West Africa. I was a big bodybuilding fan from very, very early on. I loved the physical sports. I loved watching football. I played basketball, and I loved bodybuilding. I remember, you probably this is so what's the word? It's not cringe. Cringe isn't the word I'm looking for, but you've probably seen the videos of Africans like using like
Yes.
concrete and stuff to build weights. And yeah, at one point I was one of them, right? My parents were very supportive of things that I wanted to do. I remember asking my dad to buy me some bags of cement, right? We had these containers and I'd fill them up with concrete to build like barbells and things of that nature. And so my love of working out has always been there. When I moved back to the States, like 18-year old, 18, no, sorry, I was 16. Moved back to States when I was 16-year old. One of the very first things I did when I was able to get a job was to ask my uncle to sign me up for a gym. And I think it was World's Gym. That was my first gym. So I've always loved working out. All the magazines. I have boxes and boxes of Muscle and Fitness and all those magazines from back in the day. The one thing that I could never get right was the nutrition aspect of it, right? The flashy magazines had the flashy supplements and, the quick fixes, and you do this, you'll get this. And I did that for years, right? So I've always worked out, got really, really strong along the way, lost some strength, but I never was able to get my nutrition on point, right? And so then I started working in this particular career field. And like I said, I had some personal challenges. One of them was I was divorced back in 2009,
I didn't know
and
that.
yeah, so I'm on my second marriage now. But in 2009, I got divorced, and I was in pretty decent shape prior to that. I worked out all the time, and, not with good nutrition knowledge, but just working out. My ex-wife was in the military, and she would fat shame me, lack of a better word, she was fat shame me. So I did everything that I could to maintain a relatively decent physique that went along with my you know bodybuilding aspirations at the time. And but dude, every time I went to the doctor, all my biometrics were off. I would have her sit in the room with me right before the doctor come in, and my blood pressure be sky high because she's picking on me and stuff. All of my biometrics were off, and as soon as I got divorced, whoo, I showed up to the doctor and everything started looking great.
That's
But the
insane.
same, yeah, it is the same, right? So, but at the same time, you are still separated. My son was only 3 years old at the time. There was a lot of loneliness going there, and so I turned to food. And within a 6 month span of time, I had gained 75 pounds. So I went from, I think I was 220, maybe 219, 220, and I was definitely over 300 pounds within 6 months time, right? And I carried that. And once you get to a certain weight, right, and kind of mindset, you're just kind of comfortable even though you're not comfortable. And so I carried that weight with me really until 2015. And then in 2015, like I said, I shared the story earlier on where it's kind of like, oh, I want to be the total package. I just don't want to be the guy that's go to behind the scenes. I want to do it all, right? Not that I want exposure for myself, but who's better to provide the kind of information that I want to provide or services than me? And why am I shorting myself the opportunity by not taking control of my health, right? So in 2015, started that whole journey. But then again, never really had the nutrition aspect of things. I did a lot of fat dieting, keto. I lost 60 pounds, right? Carnivore, I lost another 20 pounds, right? And I was a big proponent for it. I surrounded myself, almost became my identity at one point in time, right?
I
But
remember. I remember the
yeah,
intake form.
well, yeah, you remember you take form, but even then I wasn't that strict. But the one thing was that it wasn't sustainable, right? So I would be keto all day long, but sad diet in the evening, right? And so that was what was really happening. So I was yo-yo dieting. I'd lose weight, I'll gain weight, I'll lose weight, I'll gain weight. I'm not talking about lose weight and then gain like a few pounds back here and there. I mean, I'll lose 20 pounds, put on 30 pounds, lose 30 pounds. It was getting
Yeah,
tiring.
the yo-yo, it's gotta be terrible
Yeah,
for not only your pancreas, but, like, kidneys and everything else going on, right?
right. And so I think in 20, yeah, it was 2020, in 2021. Yeah, 2021. So everything that happened in 2020, 2021. We had COVID, which was very stressful. The world shut down, but what I do for a living didn't shut down. Then we had the George Floyd unrest and civil unrest and all the movements and everything else. And I was kind of conflicted because I'm a black man working in a particular career field, and I have all of these varying emotions and but I need to remain professional, and as unbiased as I am, and not be influenced by what's going on around me to be able to do my job. And I was actually I'd probably sitting around 230 at that time, and but it just got to me. So I put on maybe about 50 or 60 more pounds, right? Jump back up to about 280 pounds, right? And so
Yeah.
I was carrying that around. I broke my wrist at that time too. I was big into kettlebells. I was a big kettlebell
I
strongman kind of guy.
remember. I
Yeah,
remember.
I would snatch 56-pound kettlebells overhead and all that kind of stuff. So the girth was good for some things, right? It was like almost like a strong man, but I
Yeah.
broke my
Weight
wrist.
moves weight, man.
Yeah, I was moving some mass and I was loving it for sure. But I broke my wrist, and then I started dieting again, so I lost a lot of size, but I also lost a lot of muscle mass. But as soon as I got my wrist back and starting to be able to move again, I put on the weight again. And so I just was not very, I just didn't enjoy the fluctuations, right? I had two wardrobes. I had my fat wardrobe and I had my fit wardrobe. And so I'm like, I, I have to do something, right? And so that was when I'd seen. I think I talked to your wife. I don't remember. I think I talked to your wife right about that time, and she mentioned you. Um, there were some ladies at work that had used you. There was one of the guys that I worked with, that I saw him pop up on your story, and so I was like, they all seem to be doing pretty well. Let me just reach out and say and see what this is about. And if it doesn't work, at least I tried. So that was really in a very long about way. That was the point. I was like, let's need to try something different.
Yeah, there was like a 4 or 5 month period where I had like an entire roster of the Travis County to the just Travis County in general. And it was fantastic because I was getting results and that only fed in onto itself. And it was while Andrea, it was either during or post Andrea in the academy. And I actually used a lot of that to help her while she was in the academy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So it created that flexibility for me to like help her. And then we got a place for rent that was 12 minutes from the academy. So it made everything so much easier.
Oh, for
And
sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was my motivation was that the more results and the more things that I could leverage off of the coaching and the training, and I was in-person training at the time too, like heavily. I had a roster of like, 10 or 12 people a day. And I was leveraging that to help Andre get through the academy. And
Hmm.
that was like our biggest thing. And when we moved in together, like I think it was like 2 days or a day before she started the academy. And she was still working at the jail with you and everything else like that.
Hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's good stuff.
Yeah.
I think you froze up.
Now, what was
There you go.
the hardest thing you had to accept when you got started? When we got started together, right? And you filled out the intake form and we had our talk and you were about to pay, well, or at least, or maybe you got the program. What was the biggest thing you had to accept to embrace this new version of yourself?
That I wasn't right. That I was not right. I bet. I know I've said this to you many times. I really do appreciate you because I am not an easy person to work with. I question everything. I'm very critical, and to be honest with you, sometimes I see things you send me, and my first inclination is anger. I'm like, "What the hell is this?" Like,
I know it too. I'll read it and I'll know. And I'm
I'm
like,
like, and then
ooh, he's pissed.
I start writing, and I'm like, okay, that's not what I mean, but it's coming across. I'm like, what is this? It was just accepting the fact that I had to give over what I thought I knew to someone else and trust the process. Trusting the process is the hardest. I don't know how many times I asked you, and you've always been so cordial and nice to respond. Like I'll see you post a story and I'm like, hey, is that person still doing well? I mean, because I wanted to see long-term results. I wanted to know that what I was getting into wasn't just going to be a program that we did and then ended, and then I was going to put the 50 pounds back on. And I remember asking you, I think it was a couple of months ago, you posted someone's like, hey, how's that person doing? Um, it's trusting the process. It's something that I still struggle with today. You've probably seen some of that feedback, like when you told me, hey, let's do this movement instead. I want you to start from the ground for the RDLs versus this. And I'm like, I don't want to blow out my back and blah, 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 blah. You like, trust me. And I'm like, oh, after I settled down, I'm like, he hasn't been wrong yet. So let me go. Oh shit, this actually feels good. Okay. Oh, is that what he meant? So that was really what the biggest thing for me was, still is for me. I'm a work in progress. I'm not perfect by any means. I am going to forever be that critical person that, if something is not in line with what I believe, my first inclination is going to be defensive with that information, and then eventually I've learned to give things a chance. And so even if I come across as I'm not doing this, you just know in the background, just ornery old man here.
Yeah,
Thinking he's
that
gonna
was
he's
like
gonna go do it, but he's gonna go do it, but he will protest at times. So, but that definitely was the hardest thing for me in the beginning, especially when starting the challenge. Because remember, I'm a big keto head, big carnivore head, at least during the day, at least of what I like to show the world, not necessarily what I was doing. And here you come with, hey, eat all these carbs. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Hey, man, my blood sugar doesn't do this well. Blah 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 blah. You're like, well, drop the fat. But wait a second, keto is all about fat. What do you mean drop the fat? Hey, fat doesn't make the blood glucose spike, and then you learned me. You learned me. You learned that if you give me the science, the why, I shut the hell up, because what who am I, right? And so that's one of some of our relationship building is I ask a question and you're like, okay, all right. I already know, Jonathan. So here's what the studies say, and you can read it here. And I'm like, okay, all right.
I remember we did almost an exclusive low fat, high carb diet, and you were up to like 200 to 300 grams a day, and you got to 220, 222 at one point.
Yeah, you had me higher than that at one point. I think it
Yeah.
was like 350 grams of carbs, you know?
Mhm.
You
And
had
you
me
were
up to 3.
trucking through them. You were trucking through them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now you're a big carb guy.
I built an engine for sure.
Yeah,
I
and the
built an
pancreas
engine
is
for
like a
sure.
muscle, man. Is like the more your pancreas can start to utilize and handle and create insulin for, then we're essentially reversing, the condition, which is type 2 diabetes, because your pancreas is becoming stronger and better
Mhm.
able to handle that glucose on a daily basis.
Right, right. So
Instead of trying to shuttle, because fat, when they take rodents and they try to induce type 2 diabetes on the rodents, they feed them a high saturated fat diet, because saturated fat is going to blunt that pancreatic response.
mhm,
Or if you eat a high saturated fat with a bunch of carbs, that actually prolongs the insulinogenic effect of the food. So what you want to do is, if you're going to have like a ton of carbohydrates, do it without the fat so that the pancreas can manage it, and most of it gets stored as muscle glycogen. But if you're going to go the opposite route and go higher fats, then you want to do that in an environment to where you're going to be doing more low intensity exercise throughout the day, like you're walking or you're stay
mhm.
state, because fats do play a role in gallbladder hormone,
Hormones, right.
CCK, digestion is a big one. Having enough fat for digestion is huge. Neurotransmitters, and then the other one I would have to say for fat is satiety. Is people when their blood sugar is more steady throughout the day, and if you add fat to a meal, it keeps that blood sugar steady for a long period of time.
Mhm,
If you add a little bit of fat to meals, it keeps that blood sugar steady, and then you're not hungry as frequently. And that's like the biggest thing I see with you is just managing appetite. And if I can keep your appetite low, then you're a happy camper. Everything stays consistent,
right.
and things get really, really absolutely awesome. My next question for you is going to be, besides, that, what were your, what were the initial? thoughts and changes that we made, and what were the biggest impact that they had on you overall?
The biggest one was that carbs weren't the enemy, right? And so I know this is kind of cliche because you hear a lot of people say, but it really is the truth. I had really villainized carbohydrates. Um, and the fact of the matter was the kind of carbs you're eating, right? So carbs paired with fats, just kind of put it to the high, very palatable foods were the enemy, not the carbohydrates that are natural single ingredients that were created by God and meant for man to eat. And learning that really made a big difference. And then the other thing too is that once I stopped focusing on one style of eating, I had a lot of food freedom. Um, Lots and lots of food freedom, right? So uh, you your diet your diet plan when you first gave it to me, if you remember, it was very strict. You're like, just eat this, this, and this. And I kept on looking and
Well,
said, hey, hey, can we go from calories to macros? Just tell me what macros I'm supposed to eat. And then I started creating these meals based on the macros. And you were like, oh wow. As long as, and I was like, yeah, I'm following these macros, I'm following the macros. And so learning a lot of food freedom. And I love to experiment too, right? So it was fun had do experimenting in the kitchen to meet the macros while not getting bored, because I get bored really really easy. That's another one of my big
mhm.
problems. I'll do a program today and then tomorrow I'm doing another program, just jumping all over the place. But consistency and the macros, and when we start working together and you laid out those macros, it allowed me to be consistent while playing within the rules. So
Yes,
that
and,
was
like,
really
that's
awesome.
the biggest thing for me is that I give calories, macros, and a sample, an example of how to fill your calories with 30 foods that you love and enjoy. And I love this approach because then there's a default diet that if you don't want to think about it and you want to just plug and play, there's a default diet. But if you want to play around, there's the macros and the calories. And I tell people all the time, they're like, what do you think about this food? Or what do you think about that food? I'm like, I don't think about what food you're having, because as long as it fits within the calories and the macros, it's all carbon atoms at the end of the day. And as long as you are abiding by the number of carbon atoms that I want you to intake on a daily basis, the result will be the same, if not similar.
Yeah.
So, and that's why, like, getting to a place to where you can be flexible is where I want to go with everybody, but a lot of people get overwhelmed with that. And that's kind of why we had to, like, graduate to that period. And
Yeah.
sometimes if I try to throw that at people too soon, they get overwhelmed. It
Yeah,
becomes too
yeah, for
much.
sure.
But
Being
you had a really good, like, very balanced perspective on how to create that flexibility for yourself. And now you've, like, taken the reins and ran with it to where we can make small adjustments. And I love now that we work with your training so well, because now I can really micromanage your training and adjust the diet in the same capacity.
I remember before I remember, before you started programming my training, you'd watch my Instagram videos and then you send me like, yeah, that bench press looks like crap. And I'm like, what's he talking about? So yeah, no, for sure. And you want to know something also really cool? And I think this is important for anybody who is listening to this that's working with you as well. I've watched you grow as well. You came in, you had a mindset. You were always very flexible and open, but I have also watched you grow as a coach. From being you were never very strictly adhered to one ideology. You were very open, but still, whatever you presented first, I've watched you transition over time. Where as you are learning and growing, you're implementing into your coaching. And one of the benefits of long time being a client coach relationship is to see that transition and say, oh, okay, and follow along with that. It just makes the process easier over time. So,
Yeah, it's funny. I have a journal. Yeah, I have a digital journal that has all of every program, everything I've ever ran, every program I've ever written to anybody since 2011, 20 no, yeah, 2010, 2011. And I'll go back through those and I think about where I was when I wrote those, or what my mentality was when I wrote those. And it's so vastly different now because I'm just more well informed, but also I've worked with so many more people that I
mhm.
kind of understand that 99% of fitness is mindset. 99% of this is getting is like getting them in the proper place psychologically. And if I can build trust with that person, then I can give them directions and they'll follow. And that's the number one thing with coaching is building trust with somebody. To where
Mhm.
now, John, if I told you to do something, you would ask me for validity, you'd ask for the studies, you'd ask for these things of reasons why, but you trust me enough to know that I have your best intentions in mind. And that's
Exactly.
the biggest thing with coaching that I realize. It's like I see a lot of people, a lot of coaches with bad programs, like bad diets and bad philosophies get results because their people trust them. And that can be a good or a bad thing, but when you earn that trust with somebody, it should be with informed decisions. And that's
That's
my biggest mindset.
That's what I was about to say. We all need to be informed consumers of information. I mean, I was raised that way. My mom was in education or is in education, and every summer our summers were just dedicated to researching. And back before you had Wikipedia and or now Google Gemini we had volumes. My house was a library. We had volumes of encyclopedia. So I grew up being an individual that needed to be informed about whatever I was getting into, do a lot of research before I even jump off in the deep end on things. And so you're absolutely right when you say that you should trust the process, but you should ask questions. You need to be your best advocate as well, right? As a client, you need to advocate for yourself. So, and you know yourself better than anybody else. The coach is going to give you the best possible cues based on the information that you give them. And if you don't give them valid information and you try and hide things from them, and then you're not getting the results. The only person you should be annoyed with is yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the best example of this is like you mistyped the other day. You were asking about hyperextensions, but you wrote out hypertension. And I gave out like this
I'm
like
like,
whole laundry list of things, and you were
I'm
like, no,
like,
no, no,
I'm like,
this.
that doesn't work the glutes.
And I was like, well, at least now he knows that I'm prepared to give information in any capacity, regardless of how he asks.
Yeah.
And like having a coach that's willing to do that is what I take pride in. Is that there's no dumb questions with me. There's only me trying to find solutions for other people that they can
Hmm.
grasp and they can hold
Right.
on to, and really I've tried to refine the art of not because I've always had the information with my degree. It's how do I convey that information? How do I communicate that information so that it's received in a great way? And I think that's like the number one thing in coaching that a lot of people forget is that 99% of it is how you communicate. And if you're an asshole about the information you're providing, you're being an asshole. But there's also a way to convey information from coming from an empathetic and from a place of compassion to where you're like, hey, I'm trying to help you and make you better. And
Right.
like that's why when people say, hey, can I eat this? And I go, you're a grown adult. You can eat whatever you want. I'm never going to tell you you can't eat anything. But if you want to progress, this is what I recommend.
Hmm. You're absolutely 100% correct.
Instead of being that, like, for lack of a better term, just like that domineering parent that's like, no, no, you can't. No. Even on contest prep, I've talked to now a lot of world-class natural bodybuilders, and you would be astonished at the stuff they fit into their calories on a day-to-day basis because they're like, if I create some flexibility for myself, they're like, I have a default diet.
Hmm.
I stick to 95% of the time. But if I create this 5% where I fit a cookie into my calories or I fit this ice cream into my calories, then I don't binge. And then if I don't binge, I make more progress. And if I make more progress and I diet a little longer, then that creates better adherence. And
Right.
so the
Right.
name of the game is, what language do I have to speak to the individual, because everybody's so different, to get the greatest amount of trust, to get the greatest amount of adherence.
Right. But you mentioned something about the macros. We talked about that a little bit little bit earlier on. But with it, if it fits your macro mindset, you gotta be still very. For me, I can't speak for everybody else. I can
Mhm.
speak. I still have to be very, very careful because yes, there are lots of things that can fit into my macros, but will cause me to fall off the deep end. So a little ice cream is one thing, but fitting ice cream into my macros every day will mean that in a week my macros will all be just ice cream. So I got
Yeah,
to be careful
yeah.
when it comes to that.
My thing is every once in a while, post-workout, I'm like, "Man, I just want a little bit of candy." And I'll stop at the dollar store and I'll get a little thing of those, those dots?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'll get the dots and I'll eat them in the car with a diet Sprite. And like
And the,
that's like, once every other week or something, but it's enough to where I don't want anything else. And it's
right.
relative, it's still glucose. It's still like, s- you know, it's still solving the thing of the glycogen replenishment that I want post workout.
Hmm.
So there's purpose there. But if I was to have candy every day, I'd be starving and I would just go off the deep end. Or if I was
Right.
to try to fit cookies into my diet, I'd go off the deep end and I'd buy six.
Oh yeah.
So it's knowing yourself enough to where am I going to overeat this food? Like for peanut butter is one of them. Peanut butter for people is one of them. I did a diet with a strong man who had me eating so much peanut butter that I don't care about peanut butter. But a lot of people it was a keto diet, actually, ironically. It was 700
Calories.
grams of protein, 250 grams of fat, no carbs, and it was 7,600 calories. And I did that for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was 1 to 2 tablespoons of almond or peanut butter with every meal, and 8 ounces of chicken thighs or steak or ground beef every 2 hours.
I couldn't even imagine that.
I was 50 pounds heavier.
I still couldn't imagine. That just sounds like a lot.
50 50 pounds. So, I ate so much peanut butter, they just don't care about peanut butter anymore.
It's funny. It's funny. I'm like, that sounds like a lot, but that's structured. I probably did the same thing, but in an unstructured manner back in the day, right?
Yeah.
I probably had some 8,000, 9,000 calorie days, because I was a buffet king back then. So
Oh, easy.
cheap.
It's so
It was
easy when it's,
cheap.
like, chicken thighs and, like,
Hmm.
ground beef and like stuff like that that's calorie dense. Like you got to think about it. Like chicken thighs doesn't take up that much room in your stomach.
Mm-mm.
And they used to go down, and at the time I lived with a chef, and she would prepare all my meat for the week in like 2 hours. And so like the ground beef was like these like seasoned meatballs, and
Hmm.
the chicken thighs were like done with a Cajun seasoning. So if you think about that with like a tablespoon of almond butter, like it was easy. I could put back a meal in 30 seconds. It wasn't hard.
Right.
And that's why like I always tell people with like the keto stuff, especially the keto stuff, like the coconut oil and the coffee and that kind of jazz. It's like it's so easy to consume a ton of calories
It
that
is.
it gets dicey, and that's why a lot of people I have to almost give caution for peanut butter and almond butter because I'm like, hey, can you measure 14 grams of this? Or are you going to measure, what looks like 14 grams and then finish the rest that's on the spoon?
Hmm.
You
Well,
know?
here's a quick hack for you if you like peanut butter, but you're doing all some fat-free Greek yogurt and some PB2.
Yes. Oh, that's a staple of mine. That is a staple. Now, what have you learned about discipline on the days you didn't want to show up or the days you didn't want to do the diet?
Mm.
Because I know that you were always training anyway.
Yeah, so training for me is a way for me to escape reality, right? So for me, I show up regardless. I show up regardless to train. But when it comes to nutrition, that I'm gonna still fail at times when it comes to the nutrition piece, right? I'm not where I want to be. I go through periods of of great success, and then I have periods where I struggle. And I think one thing that I've learned and take away is that I need to forgive myself and just get right back on the train. I love it when you say, when I'm like, hey man, I ate off plan, and you're like, well, just get back on plan tomorrow. And so I start implementing that, right? Like one of my biggest things is I do quite a bit of traveling, not as much as many people, but I still do quite a bit of traveling. And you're gone and you're away from all of your comforts and what you know and what helps you with your discipline. And when you come back, sometimes it's just hard to transition right back into the plan, right? And so what I started doing was, when I knew I was uh, leaving to go somewhere, I'll make sure that I have meals ready and prepped for when I come back. So even if I come back and I'm like, oh, I'm craving and I want Chinese food or I want pizza or anything like that, all that's really happening to me is I've learned that I'm just hungry, and my mind is reverting to what is most palatable, right? What tastes good, and I just need to eat something. So I have meals stashed away so that I can come back, and when I'm hungry, I'll just eat those. And usually that food noise, because that's what that is, goes away after I eat a couple of prepared meals. And so that's what's helped me with the that's one of the things that's helped me. The other thing too is, when you eat off plan, you gain all that glycogen and water. And back in the day, I'd be doing fantastic, go on vacation, and come back and be 10 pounds heavy and say, "Oh, I screwed it all up," and just say, "F it," and go down that road, right? And learning that that's not the case at all. That's travel, that's additional water, that's stress, that's all those kind of things, and give it about 5 to 7 days of consistency, and you're back where you started. Sometimes even a little bit better, because you're giving your system a break. And so those couple of things have really helped me with my discipline overall when it comes to consistency. Even though, like I said, I'm not perfect, I still have failures. I'll come back and for 5 days I'm still not eating like an asshole, but not following my plan. But implementing those things have really helped me with my discipline when it comes to my nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah, those are huge for you. Those are huge.
Hmm.
I remember, like, that was, like, a big thing, like, you would travel, be like and you'd freak out at first. I was like, "John, I have now the new 10-day rule." I go, "Stick to your plan for 10 days, and if in 10 days you're still up in weight, then you can complain. But until then, you give me 10 days." And usually by day 5, you'd be lighter than you were before you left. You'd be like,
Right.
"Oh, I don't have to stress about anything. It's
Yeah.
totally fine."
But it's up here, and I know, but like I said, I'm human. Soon as I see
Yeah,
that
yeah.
weight going in a direction that I don't want it to go, I'm like, oh my god! Like right now, well, my weight's trending really good, because last year this time you actually had me working on gaining some weight, and then I was struggling to, I was struggling to gain the weight last, which is funny to say. I was struggling to gain weight.
Yeah, we were
Uh,
at, like, a little over 3,500 calories, and you were like, "Dude, this is
It was too
crazy."
much. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
wasn't and I wasn't really I wasn't putting, I think we talked about putting on like 10 to 15 pounds, and I don't think I put on more than 8 pounds during that period of time. So,
and your
and
blood sugar
this year,
stayed perfect. Perfect
yeah,
the whole time.
blood sugar stayed perfect. And this year, we know with the holidays and everything else, and this year is way more busy than last year was. You actually put me on a deficit because you knew I'll be coming up against some of the challenges of the holidays, and it's working out. I'm sitting at what my average weight. So basically, taking the average of my macros and my calories, I'm probably at maintenance right now, which I love. Actually, I'm
Which
losing a
is
little bit of
exactly
weight,
what I
so
wanted, which is
yeah.
exactly what I wanted, and, like,
Hmm.
that's kinda how I explain things, so that way it ruins that guilt. It completely takes away the guilt mentality of, like, "Oh, I had a couple cookies," or, "Oh, we had Thanksgiving dinner." I said, "That's already equated for, because you're in a
Right.
slight deficit already. So if you give me consistency, you can have those meals off with your family, and then you're right back on the horse." And, yeah, there's gonna be fluctuations in water, but overall your body composition is improving, and not only that, these meals are probably just lowering a little bit of fatigue, and your training gets better.
Mhm. Training has been fantastic.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it's an absolute pleasure to see that. And, like, what have you preferred? Have you preferred, like, the gaining phase during the holiday, to where you just don't feel like eating so much, or have you preferred the slight deficit a little more?
It's a good question. I think I prefer whatever plan that I'm on, and I'm having success. I don't really care. To be honest with you, I think whatever the plan is at that time, that for whatever goal I'm working towards, that is what I'm enjoying. I don't know if I necessarily have a preference. I'm not into it for. I think you've kind of talked me out over time over the whole mass gaining thing. It's more refinement, right? I'm getting older. um, Regardless of if it's good weight or bad weight, weight is weight, and it has its implications on the body. Um, I just want to be healthy, and whichever is helping me meet that goal, that's what I'm good for. So come January, if you're like, okay, I'm gonna up your calories, and we're gonna work on putting a little bit more mass on, I'm gonna be happy doing that, because I know it's cyclical, right? I know there are gonna be periods where I'll be doing that, and some periods where I won't be doing that. Now, the only time I'll freak out is like if you give me a voice message saying, I'm putting you on 1,400 calories, like I thought you did the other day. And I was like, what the heck? That's the
No,
only time.
2450,
I had
2450.
2450. I know. I was like listening, and he's like, I heard 1450. I was like, is this was this meant for me? And then it was 2450. A few minutes later, I heard that, and I was like, okay, good. But no, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think just following the process, and I'm a very process driven person, and so being part of a process, once I buy into it, I enjoy it. So I can't say that I prefer one over the other, because on both, I don't suffer. I haven't suffered. I've met limitations and overcome those limitations, but I haven't suffered. We've gone to the point where my hunger is manageable on both plans, and I'm making progress. So I'm good with those.
Yeah. So, last question for you.
Mhm.
If you could talk to the version of yourself before we worked together, like right before we worked together, what would you tell them?
Get yourself a coach. Get someone that you can talk to, and you can talk through whatever process that you're trying to go through. I think for me, if I had started this process a whole lot earlier, there'd probably have been a lot less pain. There would have been a lot less fluctuations. Like I said, I am my own worst enemy. I thought I knew what I knew, but the fact of the matter is that I did not. Um, and I paid for it. I paid for it. It took me a very long time to get to where I am now. I'm happy I am where I am now, but this could have been addressed a long time ago. So if you're thinking about a coach, get a coach. It'll pay dividends. I mean, we spend money on a variety of different things. We blow money on a variety of different things, and we all talk about our health. And if health is important to you, then that's where you should put your focus on, right? You should put your focus on your health and your family, um, because both support each other. So that's what I would do. That's what I would tell my self prior to working with you.
Well, John, I really, really love and appreciate that, dude. And I appreciate you spending the time to do this with me. It was huge, and I'm super grateful that we continue to work together and make progress.
Absolutely. And this counts as my check-in for the week.
Yes, it does. All right.
All
I'll
right.
talk to you later, John. Thank you so
All right.
much.
We'll talk to you
All
later.
right.
Take care. Have a great
Bye.
one.
Thank you.
Bye.